Well, good morning. Happy April 30th to you. It is the last day of April. Can you believe it? Tomorrow is May 1st. Is that May Day? May Day, May Day. I cannot believe we're already in May. There's 4 weeks left until summer. And summer, you old Indian summer. What was that from? Anyway, thanks for joining me this morning on this beautiful day. 54 degrees out this morning. It's 55 now. And beautiful morning. A couple things that struck me this morning. One is that how dependent we are on the internet. I'm sitting here preparing for this Bible study this morning. And, the text comes from the internet. The whole setup, gets podcast to the internet. And research is on the internet. Everything is like, how did we live without the internet? So many years ago, when I was growing up, we didn't have the internet. We had a dictionary. We were fortunate enough that we had an encyclopedia. We had a whole set of encyclopedias, A to Z, in our bookcase. Do you remember bookcases? We actually had bookcases in our house with all sorts of things on the bookcase. We had books that, you opened up and you read. Now, Jennifer still loves to read books, actual books. I've long since moved over to an electronic digital book, which is just easier for me. Plus, I don't have to store them because, you get books. So anyway, the other thing I wanted to point out was that for some reason, we are inundated with plant life in our house. I think all the rains that we had in January and February and March, we have plants. We have a couple citrus trees that we thought for sure were dead, that were not going to bear fruit. They're all bearing fruit this year. It's the weirdest thing. And so I have 5 citrus trees that are all bearing fruit. My plum tree is plumb full of plums. My apple tree is plumb full of apples. And my peach tree is plumb full of peach. So assuming that the deer don't come down and just nibble all these things away, or the javelina, we should have a good crop. Or birds, I guess you could have birds. Or rats. We do get rats, although we've been trapping a lot of animals because we know that we had rats, but I don't think we have a rat problem anymore. I also, I think, I'll save that for later. But as far as housekeeping goes, we are in the middle of the second book of Samuel, which is 2 Samuel. And, birthdays. We have no birthdays today. We have a birthday tomorrow, but none today. So I'll close that out. Yeah, May 1st, May Day. I think it's May Day. Isn't that what May Day is May 1st? Let's get into our study. We are in 2 Samuel chapter 17. David has fled the city, and he has left word with Hushai, the Archite, to stay in Jerusalem and to foil the plans of Absalom. So Absalom doesn't know what to do. Should he attack David immediately or should he wait? So Ahithophel, who is another of David's former confidants, who had been with Absalom, his advice was go after David with everything you have. Don't stop, don't pass go, don't collect $200, go. Go immediately. And Hushai, who is a spy for David, remaining in Jerusalem, says, wait, gather up more forces, and then go after David. This gives David some time to regroup. And when we left yesterday, we weren't sure which advice Absalom was going to take. Is he going to go after David immediately, or is he going to wait, gain even more forces, and go after David? So that's where we left it. We'll pick up the story in 2 Samuel chapter 7, 2 Samuel chapter 17, beginning at verse 14. Absalom and all the men of Israel said, The advice of Hushai the Archite is better than that of Ahithophel. For the Lord had determined to frustrate the good advice of Ahithophel in order to bring disaster on Absalom. So it's not just Absalom. I think it's the men of Israel. Now, I could see them, this is strategically, it is easier to do nothing than to do something. And it takes somebody of strong leadership to say, we are going to do something. We're going to risk our lives. We're going to take a chance. We're going to go. Every time I think about, so sometimes some of the best leadership you see on TV, for me, it was Star Trek, right? It was Captain Kirk. And Captain Kirk was a man of action. He does not sit around and do nothing. If he sees a problem, he's going to attack the problem before the problem gets out of hand. That is his leadership style. And so in Wrath of Khan? No, it was the first Star Trek movie that came out. Oh my goodness, where you see Captain Kirk as a young man, and I'm trying to think of the actor that plays him. Anyway, they're being attacked. The Borg or something is coming to Earth. And he's like, we got to stop this before it even hits Earth. And we can't go back to Earth and have a big, huge conference to find out what to do. By the time we do that, it'll be too late. So we have to go and fight. And this is how Kirk is. Well, this is what should have happened from Absalom. He should have taken the initiative and gone and done it. He should have gone... he's an infielder. He sees the problem. He should go attack the problem. But instead, it's always easier to say, well, let's just kick the can down the road and see what happens. Let's gather larger armies and let's train them and then let's go after David. And the people, it's an easier path. It's a harder path to say, let's attack now. It was the better, but it also says that the Lord was frustrating the plans. So the Ahithophel had the good advice, but the Lord frustrated that through the people of Absalom and all the men of Israel. So verse 15. And so if this is the plan that they're going to do, this actually gives David a little bit of time before they're coming after him. But he needs to now know about it. Because it would be really good if this plan was then somehow transmitted to David so he could kind of provide a counteroffensive. He now knows the timeline. Because until David knows the timeline, he has to assume that they're coming after him right away. Verse 15, Hushai, he's the Archite and he's also the spy. Hushai told Zadok and Abiathar, the priests, Ahithophel has advised Absalom and the elders of Israel to do such and such, but I've advised them to do so and so. That's a kind of a strange way. You could actually write down in Scripture what the two advices were and repeat the whole entire story, but papyrus is expensive. And so as they're telling the story, Hushai says, well, they said to do such and such, and I said to do so and so. But it's two different options. Verse 16, now send a message at once and tell David, do not spend the night at the fords in the wilderness. Cross over without fail, or the king and all the people with him will be swallowed up. So now they're going to send a message to David about what the plan is. Verse 17, Jonathan and Ahimaaz were staying at En-Rogel. A female servant was to go and inform them, and they were to go and tell King David, for they could not risk being seen entering the city. But a young man saw them and told Absalom. So the two of them left at once and went to the house of a man in Bahurim. He had a well in his courtyard, and they climbed down into it. His wife took a covering and spread it out over the opening of the well and scattered grain over it. No one knew anything about it. So the messengers are going to go and tell David, but they're seen entering this house. And so word gets back to Absalom, hey, there might be some spies. You should go and check out this house in Bahurim. And Absalom needs to go house to house, place to place, and check. This reminds me of soldiers in the Iraqi-Iranian wars or whatever, Afghanistan, going house to house, seeing if they can find spies. And of course, didn't they find one of them in a pit? Who was it that they found in a pit? Was that Saddam Hussein? They actually found him hiding in a pit. But back then, they didn't find, this is a well that's been covered up. Verse 20, when Absalom's men came to the woman at the house, they asked, "Where's Ahimaaz and Jonathan?" And the woman answered them, "Well, they crossed over the brook." The men searched, they found no one, and they returned to Jerusalem. And after they had gone, the two men climbed out of the well and went to inform King David. They said to him, "Set out and cross the river at once. Ahithophel has advised such and such against you." So David and all the people with him set out and crossed the Jordan, and by daybreak no one was left who had not crossed the Jordan. So if the men are attacking, you don't want to cross the Jordan and have half your army on one side and half the army on the other side. I mean, you all need to get to a safe spot. And one of the ways to get to a safe spot is everybody, slowly crosses over the Jordan. Now the Jordan River separates Ahithophel, Absalom, separates Absalom from David. So now he has a natural barrier. All the people are safely across the Jordan. This could have only been done if Absalom's army had been slowed down, if their plans had been foiled. And the plans were foiled. So now David is in a very, very good strategic position. All of David and his army are now safely across the Jordan. And now if Absalom wants to go pursue David, they all have to cross the army, which gives David plenty of time to stand on the other side of the river and pick them off. Or if they all cross and, spread out along the Jordan River and cross over at the same time. But typically crossing a river takes time because you find a strategic location to cross a river and everybody crosses at the same spot. This really was a good thing that the Archite did, that Hushai the Archite did. He was able to frustrate the plans of Absalom. He was able to give David a strategic advantage. And Ahithophel, poor Ahithophel, because he had the right advice. It's just that, he wasn't strong enough to say, my advice is better than the other advice. This happens sometimes. You get these people who give advice. And oftentimes they have great advice. The problem is no one listens to them. And so they have to sometimes step forward and say, you need to listen to me. This is the way that we should go. And stand up and say, do this. For whatever reason, they didn't follow Ahithophel. Verse 23. When Ahithophel saw that his advice had not been followed, he saddled his donkey and set out for his house in his hometown. He put his house in order and then hanged himself. So he died and was buried in his father's tomb. So he knows, Ahithophel is aware that this could be bad for Absalom. And the shame that he experiences is horrific. And so he goes and hangs himself. It's kind of lonely, It's like this major decision that's going to be made, and they don't take your advice. They take somebody else's advice, and everybody, who's a military commander knows that that's the wrong advice, especially pursuing David. So he simply gets on his donkey, goes home, and kills himself. And so he's the first casualty of this battle, or at least one of the casualties of this battle. So now Absalom, to go after King David, has to assemble an army and go after David. So what happens? Verse 24, David went to Mahanaim, and Absalom crossed the Jordan with all the men of Israel. Absalom had appointed Amasa over the army in place of Joab. Amasa was the son of Jether, an Ishmaelite, who had married Abigail, the daughter of Nahash and sister of Zeruiah, the mother of Joab. The Israelites and Absalom camped at the land of Gilead. When David came to Mahanaim, Shobi, son of Nahash, from Rabbah of the Ammonites, and Machir, son of Amiel, from Lodebar, and Barzillai, the Gileadite, from Rogalim, brought bedding and bowls and article of pottery. They also brought wheat and barley flour and roasted grain, beans and lentils, honey, curds, sheep, cheese from cows, milk for David and his people to eat, for they said, the people have become exhausted and hungry and thirsty in the wilderness. So David is now at Mahanaim, and Absalom has now brought the armies, and he's crossing the Jordan River, and they're coming after David. And we're going to have a big battle, a huge battle to see who will win this war. But what happens? Verse 18, or chapter 18. David mustered the men who were with him and appointed over them commanders of thousands and commanders of hundreds. David sent out his troops, a third under the command of Joab, a third under Joab's brother Abishai, son of Zeruiah, and a third under Ittai the Gittite. The king told the troops, I myself will surely march out with you. But the men said, you must not go out. If we are forced to flee, they won't care about us. Even if half of us die, they won't care. But you are worth 10,000 of us. It would be better now for you to give support from the city. And the king answered, I do whatever seems best to you. So the king stood beside the gate while all his men marched out in units of hundreds and thousands. And the king commanded Joab, Abishai, and Ittai, be gentle with the young man Absalom for my sake. And all the troops heard the king giving orders concerning Absalom to each of the commanders. So this battle, if you look at the numbers here, hundreds and thousands, this is a big battle. And typically, whenever there's a transfer of power, potential transfer of power, there will be a lot of lives lost. It is in the United States where we have a peaceful transfer of power. But that is not always the case throughout history. Often, when there is a transfer of power, it requires force. And the more powerful is the one that wins, because the more powerful then gets control of the wealth and the power of the city or the town or the community or the region. Here in the United States, when we transfer power, we do a vote, we have an election, and then whoever wins takes the reins of leadership. Whoever loses goes off quietly into the sunset. I'll never forget when the first time I wondered whether or not this would happen was when there was an election and it all came down to Florida. Do you remember this? And it was Bush versus Gore and hanging chads. And it went all the way to the Supreme Court to interpret the data from the vote. It was that close. And when it finally was all settled, the legal process said that it would be Bush 43, Bush 40, Bush 40, I don't remember, Bush, whichever the second Bush, that he would be the president. And everybody's on pins and needles because, would the other side accept the results of this election, or would there be anarchy, and would they overthrow the government? Because the only thing that allows a peaceful, transfer of ownership from one government to another is this thing called the Constitution. You got to follow the Constitution. And in Bush versus Gore, it was a peaceful transfer of power. The last election, a little bit more unpeaceful, but eventually there was a peaceful transfer of power. I mean, there was a transfer of power. In some places around the world, there is a revolution. And the revolution is the people against big governments or powerful governments. And you get these things called revolutions and people die. And I'm thinking of Les Mis with the student uprising, the student rebellion, which was crushed by the French government. But if it hadn't been crushed, you could have gotten a new government. I think about Ceausescu in Romania, who was overthrown by the people, and they brought him out into the streets and they killed him. You know, that was in that was in the 80s, so it wasn't that long ago. What, 40 years ago? You think about the Hulus and the Tutsis and all the different people who want to remain in power and what extents they will go to hold on to the reins of power. And it is a similar battle here between David and his son Absalom. There's going to be a big, messy, bloody, horrible battle. Winner takes all, gets to be in charge. But David, knowing that this battle is going to happen, says something that's interesting. He says, "Be gentle with Absalom for my sake." In other words, don't kill him. Be gentle with him. What he's saying is that, because normally, if you're doing a transfer of power, like you kill the hydra of the opposing side, and that shows that you have won the battle. And David, who's got a soft heart or maybe a clever heart, I don't know, says, do not lay a hand on Absalom. Be gentle with him. When we have this battle, I want Absalom to be here. Now, why would he do that? Does he want Absalom to take over the reins eventually? Is he going to punish him? Is he going to make an example of him? I don't know. Verse 6, David's army marched out of the city to fight Israel, and the battle took place in the forest of Ephraim. There Israel's troops were routed by David's men, and the casualties that day were great, 20,000 men. The battle spread out over the whole countryside, and the forest swallowed up more men that day than the sword. So this, the casualties were great, 20,000 men, 20,000 men. That is a lot of men to be killed, to be casualties. And it spread out of the whole countryside, and the forest swallowed up more that day than the sword. Lot of men, being killed both by the sword and by just the fact that they're in the forest. And very, very, very large battle with a lot of casualties. Verse 9, now Absalom happened to meet David's men. He was riding his mule, and as the mule went under the thick branches of a large oak, Absalom's hair got caught in the tree. He was left hanging in midair while the mule he was riding kept on going. And when one of the men saw what had happened, he told Joab, I just saw Absalom hanging in an oak tree. And Joab said to the man who had told him this, what? You saw him? Why didn't you strike him to the ground right there? Then I would have to give you 10 shekels of silver and a warrior's belt. But the man replied, even if 1,000 shekels were weighed out in my hands, I would not lay a hand on the king's son. In our hearing the king's command, you and Abishai and Ittai, protect the young man Absalom for my sake. And if I put my life in jeopardy and nothing is hidden from the king, you would have kept distance from me. So Absalom, who we know is handsome, and one of the things that makes him handsome is long flowing hair, right? It's a vanity thing. He's riding under a tree and his long flowing hair gets caught in a tree. And David's men see this. Now, they could go and they could strike Absalom down where he is, and they probably should. That would stop the war immediately, except that David said, be gentle with Absalom. So this guy's like, I don't know what to do. So he goes back to the generals and says, hey, I just saw Absalom hanging in a tree from his hair. It's like, well, did you kill him? It's like, no, I didn't kill him. I was told by David not to kill him, but I'm telling you now that he's hanging by his hair. So, they should go, they should cut him down and bring him to David, but not Joab. Joab said, I'm not going to wait like this for you. So he took 3 javelins in his hand and he plunged them into Absalom's heart while Absalom was still alive in the oak tree. And 10 of Joab's armor-bearers surrounded Absalom, struck him, and killed him. Then Joab sounded the trumpet, and the troops stopped pursuing Israel. For Joab halted them. They took Absalom, threw him into a big pit in the forest, and piled up a large heap of rocks over him. Meanwhile, the Israelites fled to their homes. And during his lifetime, Absalom had taken a pillar and erected it at the king's valley as a monument to himself, for he thought, I have no son to carry on the memory of my name. He named the pillar after himself, and it's called Absalom's Monument to this day. So even as of the writing of this, there's a monument that Absalom had built that's a pillar called Absalom's Monument. Now, we only have a few minutes, probably a little bit less than a few minutes, but this is Mrs. Hook's favorite story. She remembers in the Concordia Publishing House had a picture of Absalom and the horse and his flowing hair in the tree. And she has always been partial to young, strapping men with long hair. And so she saw this guy in the picture with his long hair, but he's trapped in the tree and he's about to die. And it's just a tragic, juxtaposition of Absalom in all of his brilliance and beauty, and the pain of being killed by a donkey that gets him trapped in the tree. And if you've ever seen any pictures, there's lots of pictures in history of this that show Absalom hanging from. Maybe I'll find that for tomorrow. Some pictures of Absalom hanging in the tree. Joab did the right thing. David, by leaving Absalom alive, David puts all of Israel at risk because they could spring him from jail. There'd be people who are like, well, Absalom's still alive. And while Absalom is still alive, I pledge allegiance to him. I'm not going to pledge allegiance to David. And Joab frustrates the plans of King David by killing Absalom. It was probably the right thing to do, but you know that this will probably not go well for Joab because it's a direct violation of the king's orders. And Joab has been David's, military general for a long time. And David trusts Joab, but David's also king. And there are certain things when you are a king that you have to do. And the question is, what will David do? And we'll have to find out that at our next episode. Let's go ahead and close in prayer. Dear God, thanks for this beautiful day. And until we meet again, keep us in your grace. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, let's see who we got this morning. All of you. Oh, always remembered the picture of him hanging by his hair in the tree. So Neva remembers that picture too. I'll see if I can find, I don't know if I can find the Concordia Publishing House picture, but maybe I can find a picture. There are bunnies everywhere outside my window. You better not be eating anything of my plants or you will be Absalomed. Hey, thank you all this morning for joining me. It's good to see you all. May you have a great day in the Lord, and we will talk to you later. God's blessings. Bye.